Hey, everybody. I want to just update you on some work that I've been doing sort of in the background the past couple of weeks. I'm trying to improve my ability to produce more videos and to go deeper into the issues that seem really important these days. And I want to use Kari Lake as an example of the sort of work that I'm planning to do in the coming months, because there's some stuff about her that's worth talking about. And it's an example of, I'm going to give you a few outlines here, outline a few points here about her. But this is a topic that requires a lot more work and a lot deeper dive. So that's basically what I've been working on, is putting some systems in place to be able to do a deeper dive on things like this. So this is an example. So you probably know, if you've been around here for a while, that I'm concerned with the slide toward authoritarianism in our country. And I'm especially focused on the role that self-identified Christians play in that slide. So I've been doing some work behind the scenes to just help me to be more effective in this for the long haul. So for instance, that's why I started a Substack page. That page gives me an opportunity to write some longer form articles to cover some of these topics in a written word kind of a way that are suited more for that than a YouTube video. And it allows me to organize things too, so that some of the concepts I talk about here, I'll be able to expand on and store in like more accessible versions on the Substack page. So it's just, hopefully those two things are going to work hand in hand. And I've been putting together the outlines of a newsletter that I plan to start publishing next week. And I'll probably publish it about 3 times a week over on Substack. So that's going to be hitting several topics every time I publish that. So yeah, that's what I've been working on, and I'm really happy with the progress I'm making. So to be able to launch that stuff here soon. So I want to use a story today, though, about Kari Lake as an example of the sort of work that I plan to be doing in the coming months. So you may know that Donald Trump tried to name Kari Lake. And if you don't know who she is, I won't go into the whole description here. You can look her up. But he tried to name Kari Lake, of all people, to be head of the Voice of America a while back. But he couldn't do it, because as it turns out, we have laws in place that require the head of the Voice of America to have a background in nonpartisan news gathering. And Kari Lake is the opposite of nonpartisan. Trump wanted to appoint her to that position because he wanted her to dismantle the Voice of America and its sister agencies, the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia, Middle East Broadcasting Networks, that sort of thing. So instead of making her the head of the Voice of America, he gave her the title of Special Advisor to the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which oversees all of those other agencies. So this is the sort of thing authoritarians do. Like, since Trump faced legal challenges trying to make her the head of the Voice of America, instead he invented a position and he invested a lot of power in that position. And it's basically unaccountable power, because it's not a position that has laws that hold it in check like the one that he tried to appoint her to. And all of this is being challenged in court, all the things that I'm talking about. There are several court cases going on, but this is some pretty dark stuff that they're trying to do. And in any sane administration, the very idea of appointing Kari Lake, I would call her the MAGA propaganda queen, to head America's world-renowned anti-propaganda news outlets, that would just be absurd and unthinkable. But unfortunately, she's only somewhere in the top 10 most ludicrous Trump appointees. And she's doing serious damage from that position. She's gutting the Voice of America's staff, and a lot of reporters are locked out of their offices around the world, even as we speak. And she's trying to completely dismantle those sister agencies, Radio Free Europe and the like. Back in March, she canceled the contracts Voice of America has with news organizations like the Associated Press. And she said that that move would save like $53 million, which is a drop in the bucket when you consider the work that these stations do around the world fighting authoritarian propaganda. It's not about the cost savings. It's about Trump's belief and Kari Lake's belief that the Voice of America is just what they would call woke propaganda. So this was all hugely controversial already, these moves. But now a couple days ago, we learned that Kari Lake is planning to contract with the right-wing news network OAN. That's true. This is true. To provide a news feed to Voice of America. So if they succeed with this absurd plan, the Voice of America, which is the only station in some parts of the world that broadcasts reliable non-propaganda news, is going to be replaced by one of the most insanely right-wing news organizations in the nation. And that's a gift to people like Xi in China or Vladimir Putin. And the story deserves so much more attention than I can just do in a quick video like this. And that's where I want to use this story as an example of where I hope to go with this channel and with my Substack. Back when I was working full time, I'd be lucky to have the time to make a video like this that just shares even these details with a few references so you can do your own research and fill in the blanks. But I'm arranging things now so I can handle a story like this in more detail, first of all. For example, this story deserves a detailed account of, for instance, why the Voice of America is important instead of me just saying it's important. It deserves a detailed account of why I say that OAN and Kari Lake are peddling false propaganda on a large scale. And it deserves a fair assessment of the allegations that Trump is making against the Voice of America. I mean, we should dive into what he's saying. He says that it's unnecessary, wasteful, and it's just woke propaganda. And that needs to be dealt with, the things that he's saying. And I mean, for sure, it is American propaganda by definition. Its whole purpose is to counter the propaganda of authoritarian countries around the world and to spread American values of liberty and democracy and the rule of law. But that doesn't make it false propaganda. It tells the story of democracy for people who don't get to experience it. And I'm sure it puts America's best foot forward. But that only increases my curiosity about why Donald Trump hates it and wants it destroyed. I think that's worth looking into. That's worth talking about. So those are examples of how I'd like to do more detailed work on these sorts of stories. But second, I'm working on developing a framework for how this story fits in with all the other stories I tell. So let's look at that broader framework just for a minute. I came up with a description for what I'm trying to do with my Substack page, and I think this description fits pretty well with what I'm trying to do here too. I'll work on the words a little more, but I'm going to read it just because I think it gives you an idea of what I'm going for here. So, culture, faith, and politics is a place for people who sense that something deeper is shifting beneath the headlines, where culture, faith, and politics collide in ways that feel urgent, unsettling, and deeply personal. I write to help us stay awake, to name the rising authoritarianism around us, to call out the misuse of religion in public life, and to offer context and clarity and community, that's important, for the road ahead. If you're feeling disoriented by what's happening in America, if you want language for what you've been sensing, and if you want to be part of making things better, you're in the right place. So that's the big picture. That's the story that I'm trying to tell. And Kari Lake's story fits in perfectly with that larger story of the authoritarian takeover in America and the role that self-professed Christians like Kari Lake play in that takeover. But this is really important to state. I'm not telling these stories to try to make anyone feel hopeless. I'm telling them to help us make sense of what's happening so we can respond well to what we're seeing. America is still a place where we get to decide what happens, and we can't let people like Donald Trump and Kari Lake change America to look more like them. They're authoritarians, they're fascists, and they don't get to redefine America in their dark image. They're the worst of America. We've always had an underbelly of people like Donald Trump and Kari Lake, but right now, the underbelly has the power. But there are more of us than there are of them. And one way to make sure that it stays that way is to fight back against their propaganda. we have to compete in the world of ideas against people like Kari Lake who are willing to just lie over and over with a straight face. That's not an easy task. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of depth. It requires repetition. It requires putting things into context, but it's all doable. We need to fight back against their propaganda. So that's why I'm doing this. I have a lot more that I plan to say about Kari Lake and all the other anti-American liars and bigots in the Trump administration. And I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to do this work. So thanks for supporting this, and thanks for listening.